Hey guys, welcome. I'm gonna leave this right here for now so you can see. I'm seeing the comments of where people are tuning in from. That's great. You can say hi. You can say if you're new. It's Liesl from Artist Palette. I got my cup of tea here, so if you're still waiting, we're gonna be waiting like 5 more minutes, just so we can start right at 2. So you can get yourself something to snack or drink on as we are painting. I do. So these, you can see how tiny these little sheets of paper are. This is watercolor paper I had here. Really small, but you can use bigger pieces. That's fine. We normally use bigger ones, but I had something new and I, of course, yes, and watercolor is actually really fun. It's a nice little break from, and if you think that you can't do it, it's really, I find it a lot easier, even though with acrylic you can paint over things, but it's you can just let it flow and just let the watercolor do its thing. That's what you're supposed to let it do, depending on your style. My style is to put a bit more wet on wet to make it look kind of like a gemstone feel, very glass-like and reflecting. So I also have my paints here, and whatever it is you're using, use it. It's going to be great. I like to use a lot of dry cake palettes. So this is some examples, and another example too. You probably have something like Crayola if you're just trying to see how it goes. This is what's called koi watercolor. Of options here, so you don't have to do a lot of mixing. And then of course there's pencil crayons that are watercolor and crayons even, as well as tube paint. Yes, so this was really fun for me to make. And feel free to take your time. I did add a little bit of some iridescence, like a sparkle. You can maybe see it when I turn it in the camera, but in person it's always way better. This is my gold paint. So if you have metallics, not that you need it, but it's a fun little addition to add at the very end, not as you're painting, at the very end. It looks like glitter, so you can even just take some water and glitter and it will do pretty much the same thing. So I'm just going to see, are many of us using the cake palettes today? And you don't have to have these ones, just any cake palettes. And I can, sometimes tell you how to mix ones whenever I pick up the color, how to mix it. So having a tray like this, and whatever it is you have, very helpful for mixing paint colors and to, water things down as we're going. I put that right on the side. Oh, awesome. Someone else has a Beam Paints collection. I just couldn't stop buying them. I love them. They're so amazing. And I like that they're homemade. I'm not I'm not trying to sell them. I'm not associated with them, but I just love it. And I even got some brushes. Okay, so in terms of brushes, just before we get started, let's get started. You don't really need a whole set of brushes. It really depends on what you're doing, but you really just need something like this. This is, even though it's big, it still has a tip on the end. So if all you have is that, you only have small ones, it's going to be fine. The big ones are good for spreading a lot of water around, but these are just some examples. And if you like something more in between, this one is amazing. You can do everything. This is a size 8. You can do pretty much all of this with just this one, and even I made this with just a small detailed one. All right. We're going to start with the Amethyst because that's the first one I created and it's my favorite. And I'm sure it's everybody else's favorite too. So purpley. Okay, so I did like a very light pre-sketching so that I'm not trying to guess as I go. I kind of want to keep it pretty much the same as I do this again. I just made it on a whim. Now, let's just lightly sketch it out. As you can see here, you can barely see it at all. I'm just going to lower this a little bit more. So this is what we want to do. Put that there. In terms of making your gemstones, it's all supposed to be, you know, more organic looking and very random. If you want to do more square tops, more angular, something that looks like it's been chopped off and maybe it just got chipped off, you can do that. You don't have to do exactly like mine. You can play around with how it looks. So think more like rocks, not a whole lot of smooth edges because I'm trying to make it more natural looking. I'm going to start at the top. So it's this guy right here. This one, I started with just a little bit of a angular shape. And I'm going to let it open up a little bit, just a little curve. So all I do from that edge is I just kind of bring it straight down, and over here I just cut it off a little bit on the side. So I'm going to let that cut it off. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. It can be, you know, angled. You can keep it more straight if you like things like that. And I'm just going to put that on an angle down, more like a long rectangle here, just right next to it. Press very light. I'm pressing darker here so that you guys can see. And when you press really dark like me, you're going to see it more against all of your colors. And right here, just going to put a little line for reference. Something that's meeting up around the edge of this section here. And as I get down towards here, you can bring this all the way down, but I want to make another similar rock gemstone shape that I did up here. It's just a little bit wider. So I'm making it a bit more rounded. And do that little, you can do a weird shape. You can keep it angular, you can keep it rounded and soft, smooth looking. You can have fun with it. And just remember, I made these ones, so I did more of the little pointy, look like crayon tops of them. So you can do a lot of that instead too. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit. This is off to the side. And wherever you feel like ending it, this is where I'm cutting it off with this more pointed top. So it's like a little bit lower, see, not too high. I did all sorts of sizes here to give it a lot of interest. And so this is more of a triangular top, and yeah, just bring it down. See, it's a little bit more angled over there. Just coming right up against this other one, like it's cutting it off. And I'm going to do this one over here. Very similar to just a smaller version of these guys. Just something, you can even just do something rounded for now, and then just make a little more square shapes so that it's not as smooth and rounded. It's more of a rectangle again. And when I'm doing the bottom, you can see how it dips down. It's very much like the raw amethyst style. You just kind of bring it in or bring it straight down, whatever you want to do. You can make it a little bit bumpy, imperfect. I'm just making sure this is not blurry because I had that situation happen last time, which is not cool. And up here, all you're really doing is just making sure that this is getting a little bit more sectioned off. Oh, the sketch. Yeah, it's hard to see because it's in pencil right now. Now for little tiny details, press again very light, but up here I'm just going to do a parallel line coming down so it looks a bit more 3D, and then see right on the side, just following it down, gives it a nice 3D shape. And, you know, for fun, when making these crystals, you know, when you're looking, I don't know if you guys ever, if you have one on hand, but to make them very reflective, they have a lot of these geometry shapes of these triangles and some longer rectangular shapes and stuff like that to give it more of a actual crystal look. So it looks like it's reflecting when it's turning the light. It has like this shape sticking out here. And then on the other side, this shape coming down. See, there's a line here. It's shadowed and dark. You can see more of the color. So something like this, I'm just going to, okay, let's put a little line for reference down there on that side. Make a little triangle here. See at the top here, you can do triangle shapes. You can do, I like to do more pointy ones. I don't do circles or anything, nothing soft. It's like you're trying to fit more. I guess a lot of triangles are a good way to start. Or in this one, you can just do longer lines coming up so it looks like you have more dimension going through it. And this is not something that I'm set with, it's just an idea. So as I go, I'm going to let the paint do a lot of the work. So when you start painting with watercolor, I did not have in mind, okay, I had all of this sketched out with each line like this of the reflecting spots and the darker spots. I actually just went with it, and then whatever turned out to be lighter, I kept lighter, and then I outlined it a little bit more. So hopefully that makes more sense too. But who's ready to start filling it in? And if you're watching this on replay, so you can watch this on replay, take your time. You can pause too. Yeah, we'll get started. You can skip ahead to that. Hi, Deborah, welcome in. I'm going to use my size 8 to start. So it's my pointed brush with that little tip at the end. And if you don't have the tip at the end, that's fine. Just get a detailed brush, you're all good. Okay, so I'm going to take a little dip in my water here. All right, let's move this over to the side for a little bit. In terms of color, so you can see, yes, a lot of purple, but I didn't just stick with purple. I put different colors that are pretty similar to some purple. But we can start with, I like to start lighter and then we can go darker. Starting too dark all over the place just is kind of not my favorite thing to do. And for this case, it just makes it easier when you get light color, so you have more of a light reflecting color going through it all. If you happen to have purple, perfect, just grab it. So this is, for me, this is a blue. That's not my purple. But you can grab blue and red, or a like a reddish pink, and you can mix that like about a little dip of here, and then just very little of your blue. Mix it on your palette. So if I grab some of this, so this is red, this is more of a pinkish red, which is perfect for making a nice purple. Mix that. Grab a little bit more. There, very purple looking. And the trick is to water it down. So I'm just adding more water to it. I'm just picking it up with my brush. And once you've watered it down, so if I start, let's say I start down here. I'm not really too picky on where it's going. I'm just going to start lightly putting it in, making sure that I leave a little bit of some white spots. You can actually just pick up a little bit by going like this, and it will get a lot lighter and almost back to white. Very watery. And it's also a lot more forgiving. So when you know over here it's nice and dark, if you want to keep a section really dark, you can pick up a lot more paint. You can just go right into that section. And keep it watered down. Put some over here. And if you're trying to spread it out, so I just dip it in my water now, and you can spread it out so it gets very, very light. And you can fill, say, even a lot of your white spaces, but still keep a couple just pure white. Sometimes it's just, it's a bit too empty and it just looks like you only put it in one spot. It didn't have the continuation. You want to just almost blend it out a little bit. A little bit of water, pick up a little bit of that purple, and just drag it down just a little bit here, very randomly. And what's good is you can take your purple here. So if you want to deepen it up just a little bit, even though it's still wet, you can actually just darken right in some of the creases. Just let it spread a little bit. If it's completely wet and it's got a lot of water, lift it with your napkin. Shouldn't be blurry. You can lift it with your napkin. You can just add into the creases between some of the gemstones, or you can just darken the side. So you can see here, I just want to darken this spot right here. mostly around the bottoms. Hopefully it's not blurry. It's going to look a little blurry over here, if that's what you're talking about, just because it's not, compared to this, it's not at all at this point yet. Okay, so sometimes it's good to just let it dry before, just a little bit more before you move on, and you're not mixing them all together. So this is my dark purple again, and when you go over same spots, water here, so you can see it's not running a lot because there's not too much water. Just go over these same spots when it's a bit more dry, see how much more darker it gets. And again, not using too much water for this part. It's actually like you're just painting it on as if it was acrylic. However, again, the little trick that I wanted to show is if you wash this off and you take a little bit of water, immediately after you can just spread it around a little bit better. So right here. Put a little bit more darkness over here. We can leave this part lighter. It already makes it look like it has some highlight. Oh no, it's pixelated. Oh, that's not good. Still using pretty much the same color, purple. Going to put some over here. Just, you can, in the same spots that we already had darker, you can enhance it. And you can even start outlining a little bit more. So if you're like, okay, I want this to be a bit more outlined, you can slowly start doing that. Grabbing a bit more of my paint. Make it more shapy. A little bit of water added here. And as I'm doing this, I'm just starting to make, either outlining those random shapes I've made or just make new ones. Whatever, if you see a spot that you're like, okay, I think I can take advantage of this spot here, put a triangle or a rectangle in there. And then I'm going to switch my color for now. Even if you want to do more purple, come back to it. We can put a little bit more of like a coral. So you see there's more coral in here. And peach looking colors, a bit orangey. So it's in that kind of family. It's pretty much orange, but with more red. That's what makes it look like that. So I washed this off. I'm gonna use my little tiny brush, little itty bitty one. This is around a size 2. Okay, so this is a little bit more dry. So again, if there's a lot of water pooling anywhere, lift it up or just let it dry a little bit long, and then you can start adding a new color. Otherwise, it just tends to blend and muddy it a little bit. So to mix that color, if you take your orange, I'm just taking some of that, I have to put it over here. Then I take some red. Remember, a bit of that red. You can keep adding more until you're happy with it. See, it looks more like reddish coral. And once you have that, let's just give it a little try. I'm gonna add a little bit more red. And I'm gonna water it down just a little bit too. So if I just dip it in my water, and I'm just following over here about where I was putting a bit of this color. And a little bit in here. I have a little bit of an empty spot too. And sometimes you can just put a little streak, a line of color. Give it a little bit of an outline. Outline some of your shapes. Also, water it down a lot. If you have light hints down at the very bottom of the little rock here. And just kind of swipe it down so it looks like it's all going downwards. How are we doing? I'm just checking in. It's a little upsetting to hear that the image is blurry and unfocused once again, because this is the second time that this has done this, but should not be doing that. This is getting a little bit more dry. I'm going to be adding just a little tiny hint of actual pinkish red. So you could just add more red to that peach color, or just a bit peachy. And if you add more concentrated red, it can overtop, it can make it a little bit deeper sometimes here and there. A 50-year-old palette. Okay. Hopefully it's working out. I'm going to use the same little, so you take a little bit of this red. Once it's a bit more dry, starting to look a lot more red, salmon-y, coral, like I was saying before. And just be, I guess, a little more intentional. You can add little streaks just to complement either some dark spots where there's purple. You can go right over top, that's fine. Some outlining. And just deepening up any little corners close to other rock bits. This is pretty much where my peach already is for the most part, or over top of any outlines of my darker purple. Yeah, I like to, so right here, I think I went just a little bit more darker. Okay, I'm going to take a break from that, and then I'm going to start taking much darker colors. So we're going to make it more concentrated, not as watered down. So make sure you grab your purple paint, your dark purple, mix a bit more. You might have to revive it with a little bit of water again. And you can add actually a little bit more blue to give it more of a violet look. So you're not using just the same one over and over again. That's what's great about this watercolor too, is if you're mixing it, it's not going to look exactly the same. So this is my almost like magenta. Just has a lot more of a pinkish look to it. And that blue, so if you take more of the blue, see how much more violet it looks. And this is where I'm going to deepen up. Just around some of the creases, you can really give it a bit more shape too. That I went really pointy for some reason, but that's okay, I'm just gonna stay there. So when you're doing partial outlinings, it gives it a lot more overall glare and reflection. If you're not doing solid outlines, it looks like the light is hitting it and bouncing off of it in different angles, and it's going to make it really cool looking. I'm just going to darken up right here. Wash off your brush, take a little bit more water if you want to spread it around. If you're like, wait, that was a bit scary, just spread it around. And it just has a darker smudge instead of just a really deep line that you did not intend to do. And just go over this line here. Actually, I went a bit more violet on this part, but that's okay. It's, you know, different gemstones, slightly different bits of color. Keeping it nice and deep, just multiple layers is all you can really do to really give it more deepness and saturation as well as contrast. Because right now it looks very washed out, right? But when you keep going over it, so if you just put more, say, right along this shadowed part, there, has a bit more definition. You'll notice I'm not really coloring in any white spots or lighter areas. I'm trying to just enhance the build off of it, but you can give it a little soft sort of highlight, or sorry, outline. See, just right over there, what I've done. Sort of outline that triangle here, but keep it mostly light so it looks like, again, it's reflective. And if you ever change your mind on color, so if I grab more of that magenta reddish color, it will prevent it from looking more on the blue side. If you've been a bit happy with that color, just switched it to a bit more of a reddish magenta tone. So you'll also notice in here, there is black outlining. You can also use Sharpie. So instead of relying on your brush work, you can use a Sharpie to outline it. And honestly, it'll look exactly the same. And if you don't have very good saturated black watercolor, so if you're using something very basic like Crayola, it might not turn out to be very saturated. Or again, if you're using very old paint, might not. So that's why a Sharpie is a good alternative when we get to that point. But do not do it anytime soon until you're absolutely finished. Going to darken up just where it's already dark here. And a couple streaks coming up. And you know what? Since this is your creation, if you feel like you're done at any point, maybe you're done now. You don't have to keep going just because I am. This is all your interpretation and preference on how you want your gemstones to look. Yeah, you can see I'm always going back into these little dark sections because once it dries, it actually is not as dark as you thought it was. Right in these creases here, keeping it nice and dark. Spreading that out a little bit. And just going along the bottom too, over here on these little ones. Like, don't forget about this one here. I want to keep it pretty dark. A little bit of water. You can just add in some of that color. Take some water and just spread it down. Let it run a little bit so it looks like it's kind of bleeding down. I see a shape here. And it's kind of hard to stop and think about if you've done enough or if you should keep black yet. But there is one last color for this one that I like to add in. It's just a little bit of a light blue. Now, if you don't want to go any more blue, just add more like pink. If you want to put a bit more pink, and it gives it more of a purple look. So I'm just, again, just going to wait a minute for this to dry before I continue on. Light blue. So I have this light blue right here. Now, in terms of making a light blue, it's just watering it down. That's why if you have, choice of color, you have more choices. You don't have to, you can just take it, something that's already white. If you have white, you can even just mix some white to it. So a little bit of light blue. And you can put any of this in anywhere. Usually in your lighter spots. You want to help keep things a little bit lighter looking. And this is also where if you have white paint, you can also give things a little bit more of a highlight reflection. And this is not even white, this is just a light blue. It does help a little bit with that reflective color. I like to go around some of those little lines that I've made. Or you can take a little bit of your regular darker blue. Just some minor little outlines. Wasn't really trying to fill anything in. Yeah, someone's saying, do I have a problem with camera focus? I don't know. It's it apparently is not focused properly, which from my side it looks pretty focused. Okay, washing that off. So if you happen to have white ink pen, you can take that and you can start putting in those any reflective lines if you want to. But I didn't do that. I didn't do that in the original because I know not a lot of people have that kind of stuff. You can use it. You can even use white paint, your watercolor white paint, and help keep things lighter. So if you do a little bit of some white outlining, for example, just in some of these little lines that we've made, it makes it look very glary and still using that word reflective. Or give it a bit more of a highlight. This part of the gemstone, just a little bit of water. And if you don't have any of those, just use, you can even just get away with using white paint, acrylic if you want to try that out when things are dry and done. Come back to it later if you want to do a multimedia type thing. You're just putting a little bit more down here at the very, very bottom, just white paint. Help bring out any spots, like maybe you want a nice white reflection. Mostly keeping it lighter down here, as you can see over there. A little bit of white down here. See, just enhance any spots that you see a little bit lighter, just bring it out a little bit more. And this is before I'm doing any outlining. So it's also just another layer of outlining, but it's adding a lot of reflecting into it. Pretty great. Picture of a sports car. I've actually done that before, not the full thing. So that takes a lot of time to do. This is hard to stop doing. I'm just gonna finish this part up and focus on outlining with darker colors if you want to add some gold iridescent paint. So I actually have a purple right here. I'm going to use some of that. Let's try it a little bit further. This is just my dark purple. So if you're mixing that again, great. If you have it on hand, even easier. You can go. I'm not trying to fill in any white spots unless you don't like them. I'm just going over the same darker spots. See, the multiple layers help deepen it up. And it brings it out even more so. Enhancing right at the very base of these little rocks we've made. And in this guy here, also bringing out a little bit more of those shapes that we've made earlier. Putting a bit more deepness at the very bottom. Put a little bit, so water, I just let it kind of pool a little bit here. Just at the very bottom, more onto my right side. And it's nice to get just a little bit more definition down here too. I like to keep it a bit more random, not a whole lot of purpose, so that it looks like some of the colors reflecting through here, and then sometimes it's just very clear and not very colorful overall. And I'm going to wait a minute before I start outlining with a Sharpie, or you can use your black paint. If you have black paint, use that to start outlining. But you have to wait for it to dry. So just for fun, I'm going to show you a little that I had. Maybe you'll see it. It's just it's very transparent because it's just basically glitter, but you have to add water to pick it up. And let's see if you can see it through the camera. If you just add wherever you want to, you can add it in kind of like spots that are a little bit lighter overall. You don't have to put in the white spots. You could. You can put it all over the place. It just kind of mostly sits on top of it, especially if you water it down a lot too. This is more of a white spot. See, it still looks very light. Let's see if I can bring this down a little bit more. So hopefully it gives it more, you can see some of that little golden reflecting color. So if I turn it, see, it's shiny. Okay, I will stop right here. Okay, is anyone still with me painting along? This is just white paint and sometimes touch be necessary. Okay, it's almost dry there. So I'll show you a little bit with a Sharpie on how to make this stand out a little bit more. It's really just trying not to, again, make a full outline. So if I'm just going over spots that, again, already dark, edges that you want to enhance a little bit more. I'm going to use, so while it's still drying even more, I'm going to use my detail brush, black. And you're using just a little bit of water. You're trying not to let it run, because this is how it becomes very concentrated and really dark. See if I can zoom in a little bit more. Trying to be very careful if you're adding tiny little, what I call, not really veins, but it kind of looks a bit veiny in a way. Just little lines. See stuff like where it's already darker, but keeping it light, trying not to outline too much around all of those sections. And if you like to splatter, you can always just splatter around it with some purple or whatever color. I'm going to stop there with the black before I go a little bit crazy. And whenever you decide that you're done, that should be it for that one. You can always go back when it's completely dry. Usually you want to wait for the black to dry before you do other things with it. You can enhance anything. Any dark spots, for example. And for those who are trying to, paint this in, I know that sketching it out might be one of the harder things for you. Trace it. Trace it right from the screen if you want to, pull it up on your screen. Trace around on your piece of paper, because usually watercolor paper, you can see through it a little bit easier. It's not like you're trying to put it on canvas. Okay, I'm done playing around with that. And feel free to sneak your name. You can put it on the bottom, or you can sneak it somewhere into your actual gemstone that you've made. Sharp. Okay, so that one should be done. And who is ready for, who's doing the next one with me? I have a little bit of time left. I have to pick up my daughter shortly, but this one is a lot easier. So if you're looking to do this, also, it's the exact same techniques, right? So it's the same thing, just different colors, and you don't have to pick these colors. You can pick completely different ones. I know some of us maybe have a collection of gemstones at home, like I do, and you can do different types. So you don't have to do this color. These ones are a lot easier because it's very pointy, lots of little triangle shapes at the top here, and longer lines like these coming pretty much straight down, leaving, again, a lot of white and lighter sections so that it has pop of contrast and darker spots on some sides and some spots, and letting a lot of the white show through. Okay, let's flip this paper over. Oh, and by the way, this is also from Bean Paints. Everything is. They have, it's just like a little mini booklet, so you don't have to make these giant pieces of artwork. It's kind of awesome. Same with these pieces of paper here. These are really thick. These are great. Okay, now for this one, so I'm going to be pretty fast with this one. Again, just think in terms of, like, I would say crayon or pencil crayon, starting with a more of a rectangle shape. And this, and I'm going to go somewhere on the other direction here, so it's more sticking out to the side. And these little triangle pointy tops. Looks like a rocket. And you can add similar, more angular edges instead of all the pointy ones. Give it a little bit more interest. So if you're trying to make, okay, so for example, maybe I want to do a little bit of a triangle shape here on this side. You can do stuff like that. And then you can do that little pointed one at the bottom like we did with the amethyst, right? You can do that little, looks like a iceberg bottom, the very bottom of it. Or you can just keep it softer or rounded, whatever you want to do. Okay, let's start with, I can go back to my big brush first because I'm just going to lightly color it in with, let's start with a light blue. You can take, or whatever color you please. Let's put some throughout, water it down a little bit more. It's almost like you're coloring in most of it. Feel free to concentrate a little bit more darkness into some spots, like creases. Already add your contrast. More at the bottoms and bases of these crystals. So I've washed that off. And now I can introduce a little bit more of a, if you have a different blue, feel free to add that. I'm going to use this one right here. This one is, okay, so if you ever get watercolor, what's helpful is making this little chart here, just in case. You can see when you concentrate more. So I'm using a number 3. You can see how dark it gets and how light it gets with more water. So that's what I'm using. More of an actual blue. This is another blue, but see how it's ultramarine looking blue? It's just a different blue. I'm going to use a bit of that one. I like how blue it looks. A little bit of water. While it's still wet, you can let it run and bleed. Yeah, just wherever into mostly where you want to keep it darker. I also like to start adding a bit more outlines around the shapes that we've made, or just make them up as you go. Like do nice long streaks in all of these. Less water and more concentrated paint. You can see it's deeper, especially over top of another layer. And I'm just putting some lines a bit more horizontally across so that it gives it a bit more shape at the top, a bit more crystallized looking. And in between some of this, I did use a little bit of a lighter purple. So I actually happen to have a light purple here. And you can use whatever is in front of you. So this is not something that I don't have a crystal that really looked a lot like this. I just kind of thought, oh, purple would look good with this. And you can use more teal, greens. I just liked the complement of purple. It's a good filler. Use a bit more water. I'm just adding it in mostly in the lighter spots. Waiting for that to dry for a minute. Okay. Switching to, so this is a bit of a greenish teal. I'll put that over there. Something like that. And if it's too green, just add a bit more blue. So I'm using my bright, vibrant blue. Just going over very similar dark spots as a second layer. I think I'm in a bit more green. There's already a lot of blue going through here. And if you want to add just a touch of yellow. So there I have two yellows. I have a very bright or greenish lime yellow. Greenish lime yellow is fine. Even just straight yellow is actually, it's going to look very similar because right over top of our blues and greens already, it's going to have a bit more of a green tinge going through it. Just a little bit around Again, some lighter spots you can pick and choose wherever you want to. If you want to go around some triangle light spots along some of the edges. I'm not going to overdo it. Yeah, just a little bit like that. So very small, little subtle look of some yellow in there to give it slightly different color, but that's it for me. So this is my blue. It's got almost, it's like indigo. Almost could pass as a bit of a black, especially if you don't add a lot of water. See that really, really deep. And I'm adding this in to start outlining, just, yeah, the start of the outlining process before we put any black. Adding a couple of streaks now through it. Swipe some of them upwards. And if I add a little bit of water, you can see that it just gets a little bit lighter. And let it bleed out. If you don't want a million streaks going through it, you want it to be more just a shadow spot. A little bit of water, a little bit more darkness down here. And touching up on any purple before I let it dry or add any iridescence. So some gold paint. Same with any white spots too. If you want to enhance white spots. So I do a little bit of outlining around some of the edges. White ink or the white paint brings it out and pops it out just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm just adding my black outline, and feel free to show results too on our Facebook page, different colors maybe you've put in. It's all very similar to the amethyst. The amethyst was probably the hardest because it has a lot more shapes. This one, once you've done that one, this one becomes a lot easier to just make it up as you go, decide where to put your colors to, whatever looks good. I like to deepen up a little bit at the bottoms here, and just a couple little streaks going through it, or little lines at the tip of it to give it more of a pointy look. All right, so that should pretty much finish it up. Good to know, Deborah. All right, so yeah, that should be it. If you want to keep going, I wanted to keep going. I want to do lots of colors, but feel free to head over to Artist Palette Durham region on Facebook, and you can show your different results there. You can keep practicing with the different styles, shapes, and colors. Again, this is something that I just decided to pick, and going back to this one. Sorry, and iridescence is great. Okay, so thanks for painting along with me, guys. Have a great rest of your day. And you know, stuff like this with watercolor, making gemstones. It's not just a put a line here, put a line here. It's more of just let it flow, let it be, and wherever you see opportunity with highlights, keep it lighter, some darkness, keep it darker, but having all that contrast really helps make it look more like the gems they are. Bye everyone, until next time. Hope to see you again soon.